Hello, this is a first generation Suzuki Access 125. It has no TFT screen, no alloy wheels, no disc brake, no USB, no fancy start stop system. It looks like a plain old gearless scooter meant for utility, but it offered something more. And after owning it for nearly 8 years, I've started to kind of like it. From the year 2000 until 2007, for uncles and aunties, for boys and girls, the Honda Activa remained the go to choice for a premium scooter in India until Suzuki unleashed the Access 125 in 2007. The chassis and engines were similar to other 125cc Suzuki scooters you may find in many other countries. The list goes something like this: address 125, address V125, address Z125, step 125, UY125, UZ125. Just a second. Swish 125 are all related to the first gen Access 125. The address nameplate still continues in Europe and Japan. And since 2016, the second generation Access has been made in India for India and also exported to many countries. And it is sold in the name of Address 125 there. Did you know that this was the first 125cc scooter in India? Yeah, Kinetic was offering some higher cc scooters like the Nova and the outrageous Kinetic Blaze, but this was the first in the 125cc category. The Suzuki Access was launched in 2007. Well, the one I'm reviewing today is a 2012 model, but the Access never really received any major update right from the time of its launch way back in 2007 all the way until 2016. By then, the Activa had surpassed with almost three new generations. Also, did you know that Access has a full form? Yes, this was in one of their press releases. It goes like this: attractiveness, no. Comfort, we'll talk about that. Convenience, yes. Environment, what? Security, is this it? And style, no. No. The launch version had a different sticker than this one, which changed in 2010, I believe. Then in 2014, there were some small changes. Let's call this a minor model change. The first gen Access got minor updates like a new speedometer, smaller 3 ampere hour battery compared to a 5 ampere hour battery in the first version, which goes under the floorboard. Tubeless tires, which surprisingly the older 2000 launch version, even those rims are compatible with tubeless tires. I had mine changed to tubeless. There was the aluminum grab rail, which honestly looked better than this, and 3D name badge as opposed to sticker in my 2012 Access. I wanted to get the aluminum grab rail and 3D badge for this, but it turns out that the aluminum grab rail is not compatible with earlier models, has completely different mounting points. This Access must have costed about 55,000 rupees on road in 2012, and I bought it for 32,000 used in 2018. The Access came in five colors: metallic sonic silver, pearl nebular black, candy Antares red, which I really like, pearl mirage white, and finally metallic flint gray, which is the color of my Access. When I got this Access, it had barely 12,000 kilometers on it and it was in a decent condition. I have had only one minor modification done on this Access, if you can call it a modification. It has a white light bulb for the headlamp. The stock light was just like every other stock light. In fact, now the light reach and brightness is much better than the lights compared to my other two motorcycles. The speedometer has been changed by the previous owner at some point, as this is a 2012 model but has the 2014 version speedometer. I don't know. I'm a little confused about this. You guys tell me if you understand when this speedometer came into the Access 125. What did I get for 32,000 rupees? This ugly steel guard, which I can't remove since it might reveal rust spots, huge underseat storage, at least for the time. The underseat storage is good enough for a full sized helmet, almost. I managed to fit one medium sized watermelon quite easily. I can do my usual groceries. As per the user manual, the underseat storage is 20 liters and can take up to 10 kg weight, which was really good for the time. Of course, you cannot compare this to today's scooters, which have their tank filling in the rear, and that clears up more space for storage. Also, today's scooters have become bigger. It came with single key operation for ignition, seat opening, and had a shutter, a nifty brake lock, which I find very useful in the up and down Bangalore roads. I even got the front glove box, which I believe was a optional fitment. With 160 ground clearance, I surprisingly have rarely bottomed out on a speed breaker, even with a pillion. Out of all the things, the most important aspect of the Access which makes it worth the price was the great engine, which was powerful and somehow also fuel efficient. However, as a complete package, it had a long way to catch up to the Activa. You see, the Activa was a easy benchmark to replicate for a technical competent company like Suzuki, but but the name Activa was plastered on every Indian's mind as the go-to gearless scooter. I don't blame the people who bought the Activa. The Activa had gotten almost everything right at that point of time, and Suzuki really did miss out on some things big time. Let's start with the shortcomings, shall we? My number one grouse with the first gen Access 125 is, was, and will always be the stiff suspension. It crashes and thuds everywhere. It spoils all the fun you can have with the amazing engine. This is how it feels riding on normal Bangalore roads. You can feel the shocks and jolts travel up your backbone. Even with the recommended tire pressure of 18-18 for solo and 25-36 for pillion, it really doesn't improve the situation that much. If you have to ride on bad roads, it's best to slow down to 30. No, lower. 25. No, lower. 20 km per hour. Yeah, that sounds about right. You hit a even mildly rough patch at anything about 20, it unsettles the whole vehicle. Well, stiff suspension is one thing, and another aspect contributing to the poor handling is the small 10-inch wheels. And with this kind of setup, it's not really a planted vehicle. At speeds above 60, you can feel the vehicle swaying anytime there is a gust of wind or a car goes past on the lane beside. And this is the case despite being the heaviest scooter for the time at 115 kg. I don't think there are many scooters weighing that much even today. The drum brakes on this are surprisingly good, but again, the first gen Access is simply not meant for highway speeds. It is for the city, but with speeds increasing above 50, you can feel that you are lesser and lesser in control of the scooter. This had telescopic suspension, which was touted to provide better ride quality than competitors. But I think there's something wrong with the tuning. And that's the reason why my wife hates it. She is used to a 2G Activa, which I would say, in my experience, has a much more suited suspension setup for our roads. She says the Access has no control, and I understand why she would say that. The front end on the first gen Access thuds into every minor pothole, and the front end is really light. Yes, it is easy to filter through traffic, but it does not give you confidence as you start gaining speed. It's best you keep the first gen Access under 60. Like I said, any minor bad road patch or car passing by will unsettle the first gen Access. It does not bounce around like a scooty pep, but on the other side, the unsettling comes from the small wheels and front lightness, not the suspension. The fuel tank is small, but I don't have a problem with that since the Access can do about 150 to 200 kilometers comfortably on a full tank. I did Chennai to Bangalore comfortably in two full tanks. One of the major reasons this scooter was successful at some level at the time of its launch was the performance it delivered along with great fuel efficiency. I get about 38, 42 kilometer per liter in city, and on highways it goes all the way to 46. The best I've seen is 50. But I've heard it is easily capable of going over 55 as well. Not sure. However, we need to talk about this fuel gauge. It does not really tell you how much petrol you have. Yes, I know it's a common issue in many scooters and even modern Royal Enfields. It is very misleading. Here is me filling the tank from almost empty level as per the gauge. The tank capacity is 6 liters, so you expect it to fill at least 5 liters when it is nearing empty, right? But no, it filled 3 liters to the brim from almost empty. So basically, the last bar nearing empty is 3 liters, and rest of the fuel gauge is another 3 liters. Wow. From what I can gather from the internet, this is an inherent issue and not a float damage issue. This point, which I'm going to talk about, I'm sure all the first gen Access owners will agree. There is this odd interlocked design of the center stand and the kickstart lever. This means you cannot kickstart the Access on side stand. I mean, this was such a simple thing. This could have been an easy design fix, but I'm not sure why they ended up with this. Speaking of design, why does the first gen Access look small and bulky? I mean, don't get me wrong, this scooter can seat two full sized adults easily, and these beautiful looking aluminum foot pegs are perfectly placed for the pillion. In fact, the first gen Access was longer than the Honda Activa 2G. It had longer wheelbase, but for some reason it just looks smaller in comparison. I think it's just the way the front panel is designed. Anyway, scooters looked meh in 2000s, but at least the Activa looked simple, clean, and proportionate compared to this. There's just something to its front and rear that doesn't sit well with me in terms of the design. Also, Suzuki scooters had one of the most basic and aged looking speedometer consoles. Look at this. This is the launch version. Then this is the 2014 update version. Look how horrible the speedometer looked on the Swish. Look at this god awful silencer design. And the front looks so bulbous. However, I'm just nitpicking on the design. The aesthetics of the first gen Access is not really a deal breaker for me. The service cost for the first gen Access is minimal. 900 ml of 10W30 spec oil. You change it every 4000 kilometers. Well, I have pleasant weather here in Bangalore. Insert Bangalore weather joke here. So I don't need anything more thicker than 10W30. The gear oil capacity is 120 ml, as is for most scooters in India. Every service so far has costed me not more than 600, 700 Indian rupees. As for reliability, it's too soon for me to talk about this. I'm not really done too many kilometers on this access. It has just reached 20,000 kilometers just a week before recording this audio. I have been using this consistently for the last 3 years. I don't know how long this will last, but I've heard stories of the first gen access going up to 2 lakh kilometers. I'm not sure, but I would love to know from you guys, the viewers, what kind of Odo numbers have you seen on the first gen access, and also what issues have you seen? Yes, the issues. I have got the carburetor changed once. The one on it right now is a used one. And why did I have to do that? Ethanol. The Access was lying idle for about 2 years and it was switched on very rarely, courtesy of COVID. Lesson for you and I is that if you have any vehicle from before 2023, keep that engine running at least once in a week. It is most likely that your vehicle is not suitable for E20 fuel. In fact, there were very few vehicles compatible with ethanol before the ethanol mandate. Weirdly, 2 weeks before recording the audio for this video, my Access stalled in the middle of the road and refused to start. It kept cranking, but it would not start. I thought to myself, man, is this the ethanol again? No, luckily the Access broke down right in front of a two-wheeler workshop. The culprit was either the CDI unit, which all Access models are known to fail at an early point of its lifetime, or it was the ignition coil. My Access had a ignition coil which was shorting. I mean, look at the rust on this thing. It, of course, it sat for so long, so I'm not really surprised. This scooter has sat unused for almost 2 years, and these are the sort of things that happen to a vehicle when not used in a long time. Fortunately, my mechanic was able to source the original Suzuki part, and it was only a 30-minute fix. So, for those of you who own a first gen Access or planning to buy a used one, don't. Just go for the second gen. It's a big improvement from the first gen Access. As for those of you who own a first gen Access, remember these. The carburetor is sensitive to bad quality fuel and dust. This is a repetitive problem you will see first gen Access owners talk about. The CDI unit is likely to go bad early. The issue I had could happen to any vehicle parked for long. Other than that, just keep the oil fresh and topped up. My mechanic says that the first gen Access will last for another 20 years if parts are available. Well, he says that probably because he too has one. But there is a point to what he says. Parts availability is becoming an issue slowly for the first gen Access. I had another peculiar issue. Once I ride the scooter for a while and the engine is hot, I mean normally hot, not overheating, the engine speed would rise to a very high RPM and then jerk down to a lower RPM when I'm trying to accelerate. Very weird. And this issue was there right from the time I got the scooter up till recently. It had to do something with the variator system, this much I knew. I tried changing the belt, the rollers, no effect. Finally, my good mechanic diagnosed the issue, and it was the variator plates. Now the scooter is perfect to run. I also had my horn button replaced as the spring inside the unit failed. Okay, enough cribbing. Now let's get on with the good stuff. The engine. Oh my god, this is such a good engine. It is a simple air cooled 125cc engine with XTP. What is XTP? No fancy cams or 4 valves per cylinder. It's just an inherent engine design aspect with Suzuki engines which makes them torquey at low RPMs. But I feel XTP is just a marketing jargon which they had for all their initial products in India. And what's funny is that they had given up this jargon midway. The launch version of the first gen Access had the XTP sticker. My 2012 Access does not have this sticker. Hey Suzuki, did you remove the extra torque from my engine? This 2013 brochure does not mention of XTP for the same engine. It's so weird. Why would you give up this jargon midway for exactly the same product which has been on sale? Why do I feel there is a marketing or branding story behind dropping this jargon? Do you remember the Suzuki ZS? Yes, this is the same engine from the ZS. This engine was originally introduced in the Suzuki Address V125 in Japan, and that had a very different tune with fuel injection, uh, producing 11.2 horsepower and 12 Newton meter of torque. Well, we, as usual, got the detuned version of the same engine. The first gen Access made 8.58 horsepower at 7000 rpm and 9.8 Newton meter of torque at 5000 rpm. Remember this peak torque rpm, we'll come back to this. This engine went away with the launch of the second gen Access in 2016. The second gen Access got a new engine with a bore of 52.5 mm and stroke of 57.4 mm. This engine continues to be in the third gen Access as well with some modifications. We'll come to that another day. How is this one to ride? Well, it was said to be quick in 2007 and is still quick today. It's not really a long stroke engine like the second gen engine. This 125cc engine has a bore of 53.5 mm and a stroke of 55.2 mm. You can see how it's different from the second gen engine. Hence, the bottom end is not as strong as the second gen Access or even the Activa back then, but the mid-range punch is really good. Overtakes are really fun in the city at medium speeds, and my god, this engine is butter smooth even to this day. You don't feel the engine running when you're cruising at 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 kilometers per hour. Yes, you heard that right. This engine is unbelievably smooth at higher speeds, so much so that you would be fooled into thinking you can do higher and higher speeds on the scooter. But then again, the handling simply does not complement the performance of this engine. I do ride the Access fast on highways, but I do know the limitations of the scooter very well. And it does not have that annoying whining sound Activas make at higher speed. You know the one I'm talking about. Bro, what's the top speed, bro? Bro, top speed, bro. Bro, what's the top speed, bro? Top speed, bro. Top speed, bro. Fine. It can do a speedo indicated 100, but I don't really recommend anyone going above 70 generally on this purely for stability reasons. The engine can maintain 70 effortlessly even with two people. It's that good. Now, let's look at the flip side of how this engine performs in the low end. This engine, like I said, was introduced in India on the ZS. There, this engine made 10 Newton meter of torque at 3500 rpm. Now, that's really good torque at really low rpm. However, on the Access, it made almost the same torque at 5000 rpm instead of 3500 rpm. My guess is that the torque curve had to be modified to avoid slipping of the CVT belt and hence the average low end torque. And this can be felt when riding in city. Part throttle in city does not really get you moving much. Go wide open throttle, this thing flies. But at lower speeds, you can feel the mild hesitation. Autocar India tested the Access in 2010 and they recorded a 0 to 60 time of 8.98 seconds, which could have been much better. I am not able to find roll on acceleration times for the first gen Access, but I assume those numbers would be impressive actually. The acceleration is a bit dull till 30 km per hour, and after that this thing pulls and pulls effortlessly till 70. You can ask any first gen Access owner, they will confirm this behavior. I'm not saying that the first gen Access has poor low end torque, by the way. I'm only saying that it should have been better than this. Oh, and when I say it flies, I mean it. After 30, this thing flies. The other day at a signal, I started off at green along with the Activa 125. He had wide open throttle. He definitely had the lead for the first 3 4 seconds. But then this 13-year-old scooter just pulled away so effortlessly. Yes, this is a bragging point, but that low end torque issue, it's a bit annoying considering scooters are supposed to be used within city at slow speeds mostly. In that aspect, the Activa takes the cake with better tuning for the engine. This is not really a major issue, by the way, and it was also taken care with the new engine in 2016 second gen Access. Like I said earlier, I did ride my Access from Chennai to Bangalore, which is about 300 kilometers in 9 hours. And this is on a scooter which had been worked on because it stood idle for over a year. This was the first ride the scooter went on after the repair job was done, and it was a long trip. I did take 6 breaks, which meant the riding time actually was only about 7 hours. That's pretty good for a 125cc scooter, and that should also tell you what kind of speeds I may have been doing. That trip up till today, I have never felt the lack of space on the first gen Access. The seat is wide and long, and very importantly, the glove box does not foul with my knee. But about that 6 breaks, you see, I'm used to riding long distances on motorbikes, but I have never done one on a scooter. This trip clearly told me something. You cannot ride the first gen Access for more than an hour without resorting to a break. The back pain becomes excruciating after 2 hours. So, no, by no means of imagination, this is meant for a long ride beyond 70 80 kilometers and no continuous riding for more than an hour. All thanks to that god awful suspension and the seating posture. But on the other hand, I also came across a video of a gentleman who's taken the first gen Access all the way up till Leh Ladakh. So I am not saying that you should limit yourself riding any motorcycle, any two wheeler anyway. But I am just telling you that the Access has certain limitations, and if you're looking for comfort, you should ride it within those limitations. Alright, this is getting too long now. It's time to end the video. Having bashed the first gen Access for its shortcomings, I do acknowledge and appreciate it for what it did in the market. See, back then only Activa was the big scooter available for the market which was accessible. And all of a sudden there was this another Japanese scooter which did commuting duties and was also a bit of fun. And it did emerge as a serious contender to the Activa. But Honda Activa was and continues to be the undisputed leader of the segment by a huge margin. It is almost impossible to dethrone the market leader for any product category unless the leader really screws up badly. I'm giving you approximate numbers for 2026 monthly sales. Activa sells 1.5 to 2 lakh units a month. No wonder you keep seeing them everywhere. And out of nowhere, Jupiter comes in drifting like Takumi and does 1 lakh units per month. Access is at third place with about 70,000 units per month. That's a long way to catch up to the Jupiter, let alone the Activa, which is light years ahead in sales. When the Access was launched back in 2007, the VP of Sales and Marketing had this to say: "We have specifically designed our product keeping the Indian customer in mind." And they did. The Access, with all its shortcomings and the initial pushback from the market purely because of the way it looked, got acceptance once the word of mouth spread. Even the magazines generally gave a positive review of the Access. Access was indeed designed for Indians and we loved it. And we still do. Suzuki had just come back in 2006 to India after their nasty breakup with TVS in 2001, and they had an uphill battle capturing the space of the Indian mind, especially as a scooter manufacturer. But what they had achieved back then with the first gen Access 125 had sown the seeds for what today is probably the best 125cc scooter in India. See you in the next video. Bye bye.